Trinidad, the Callaloo of the Caribbean, is the home of activist, author, and loving father, Kirt Gonzales. Dr. Gonzales is a friendly and active member of the Wake Forest community, and he has touched the hearts of many people. Dr. Gonzales will tell us a story about his experience with domestic violence.
Come back. Run. You gotta run. You gotta run.
So tell us a little bit about it and why this book, and also the title of the book is strange.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about this.
Okay. Well, what caused me to write my book? When I moved to the United States, my sister was still in Trinidad.
Mm-hmm.
My sister in Trinidad was in a really abusive relationship. And she had a child for the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And one day my mom was at home and she heard this loud noise in the backyard. And when she ran to the backyard, she saw him standing over my sister with a belt.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just the beginning of a whole lot of abuse that my sister was going through. And one night she called me because he was threatening to kill her or anybody who tried to stop him from seeing his child. And so I was like, look, I have absolutely no intentions of going back to Trinidad. So, because she was living in my apartment in Trinidad, and so just sell everything and you come on over. So I sent her the plane ticket and she came over. When she came over, now I lived on Chauncey Street in New York.
I see.
Okay.
I see. And that's the title of the book.
The Chauncey Street Monster. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because a few months after she got to New York, she started dating this guy, much to my disapproval, who lived in the building right next door to us. Ending up having a child for him, and then went through 6 years of abuse, extreme abuse. So since we all lived on Chauncey Street, and my sister often referred to him as a monster, the title, that's where I got the title from, the Chauncey Street Monster. So after the abuse that she went through with him for 6 years, she decided she had enough. She told him, you can see your child as often as you want, but as far as you and I are concerned, I'm done. But he kept stalking her and would not leave her alone. And my sister worked as a nurse's assistant. And so on the 18th of September in 2013, she left work. She picked up her 2 daughters. They were 15 and 5 at the time. The 5-year-old was his, from a friend of hers that was keeping them for her after school. When she got to the house, which, again, it was even though I had moved to Greensboro at that time, I never gave up my apartment so that she and her kids could be there.
So she was living with her kid and
in my apartment in
New
York.
York, and then you moved to North Carolina.
Yes. So when she got to the building, he was outside. This was the 18th of September in 2013. He hugged and he kissed the 5-year-old, and as they were going inside of the building, he stopped and he gave the girls $8 and told them to go to the corner store to get some chicken. When they left to go get the chicken, he went inside of the apartment with my sister, shot her 3 times in her body, and as she laid lifeless on the floor, pointed the gun to the back of her head and shot her 3 more times in the back of her head. And then he ran, and a few minutes later, the girls came back from the corner store to find their mother dead in a pool of blood. It was the younger one who ran up the stairs first and pushed the door open and saw her on the floor and shouted out to her older sister, "Mommy's dead, Mommy's dead." And
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you find out about it?
I was in California at the time. My mom, I take care of my mom, so she was at my apartment in Greensboro. And I was actually on the phone with my mother on that night. And she said, hold on, Kirt. That my sister's name is Celis. She said, hold on, Celis is calling. But it was my older niece who was calling from her mother's phone. And I heard my mom saying, what happened to Celis? And then my mom said, Kirt, let me call you back. So after about 10 minutes and I didn't get her call, I called back. I said, what in the world is going on? And that's when she told me my older niece called on the phone screaming, saying that they went to the store and they came back and now her mother is in a pool of blood on the floor. She called 911, and while she was on the phone with the operator, they told her to try and turn her mother over because apparently she was, I think, laying on her back, and so they were trying to ask her to turn her over so she wouldn't drown in her blood or something like that. And she couldn't do it, so she had to run to the upstairs house to get a neighbor to come down to help her turn her mother over. Meanwhile, the 5-year-old is in the corner screaming. So after the paramedics got there, that was when I called and what's going on. And so I was on the phone with her the entire time. My mom had then called one of our cousins in New York to ask her to go stay with the kids. My sister was shot at 8:25 that night, and at 9:30, my cousin called me back to tell me my sister just died.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been like really bad news for you. And what was your reaction on that? I mean, did you move that day to New York from California, or what did you do afterward? I mean, that's.
For a few seconds, I was stunned. So when I was able to pull myself together, and you have to remember, my sister and I are just 1 year apart. I never knew life without my sister. My sister and I were extremely close. So I just had to drop everything, fly back to New York, bury my sister. I also petitioned the courts to get parental custody of the 2 girls. And that took a few months because the father of my older niece, he was still alive. And even though he was never in her life, because of the fact that he was alive, he still had to be contacted, and it was a whole process, the courts, So after going through all of that for a few months, then I brought the girls back to Greensboro, North Carolina in December of 2013.
It's really hard. It's really hard, especially like when you have those kids. Every time you see them, you remember their mom, and so basically you wrote the book on this story.
Yes.
Well, how did you start it? Because it's one of those stories where every time you remember, it hurts from inside. So how do you get the courage to continue writing this book and eventually publish it?
After my sister's murder, I decided that I wanted to become an advocate against domestic violence. I had seen my mom go through it. I went through, even though it wasn't domestic violence, but I mean, I went through abuse as a child. My sister went through it. And the World Health Organization says that domestic violence is actually a worldwide epidemic. And I know there are friends of mine that personally who I knew that were going through a lot of abuse. And you know what? This is what I want to do. So my first project was to write the book about domestic violence, using my sister's life and murder to teach about it. It was difficult writing it.
Was there any sort of support? Is other people supporting you to write it, or I mean, I still can't imagine how hard it can be to get that courage to put it out there. And like every single word that you write on the book reminds you the person that you lost, and that's really hard thing to handle. So, was there like any other body, any other person involved with helping you writing the book, or I mean, encouraging you behind the book, or was it just you?
You know, my biggest supporter was my mom. And
Yeah, moms are always
yes,
supporters.
yeah, my biggest supporter was my mom. I had a group of friends that actually discouraged me from doing it.
Why is that?
Because they thought it was ridiculous to be writing a book on domestic violence. I mean, who's going to want to listen to you, you know? But I didn't pay anybody any mind, you know. I was determined that this is what I wanted to do. You know? Yeah, but the book, my sister for about a year was in a domestic violence shelter. All she told us was one night she and the guy was having an argument, and he threw her phone outside, and she reported it, and they put her in a domestic violence shelter. That did not make any sense to me, but I didn't, you know, try to get more out of her. When you go into the domestic violence shelter, you have to write a deposition as to why you need to be there. So after my sister's death, I found the deposition. And when I was reading the deposition as to why she wanted to be in the shelter, I was breaking down, crying so much because I couldn't believe that she was going through all of this and kept it from us.
Yeah. Wow.
You know?
Why do you think she did that?
Well, according to her, coming down to like the final year of her life, he actually used to threaten her that if she doesn't come back to him, that he would find her family and kill them as well. And I don't know if it's because, number one, she was trying to protect us. Second of all, she probably did not want to let me know because I was very adamant and vocal about how I felt about him when she started dating him.
So she may be afraid of like you not accepting.
Oh, she knew I didn't accept him, period.
I see.
Oh, no, the first day I saw her going out with him, I was livid. I mean, when she came back to the house, I literally went off on her. When he killed her, he went into hiding. Actually, his family was hiding him upstate New York.
Wow.
A week after he killed my sister, the police got a tip as to where his family was hiding him. And when they went to get him, he actually had a shootout with the police that lasted for almost 2 hours. They were not really shooting at him. He was the one he was enclosed in a room, and he was the one that was shooting out behind the police, and they were trying to talk him down, you know. And then he ended up shooting his own self in the stomach twice. And when they took him to the hospital, the doctors expected him to live because they said he did not hit any major arteries. However, 2 days later in the hospital, he had a major stroke and went brain dead and died the next day.
How do you address this issue to the public besides of your book? And would there be like another book coming up? And why do you choose even a book in the first place? Because a lot of people go on the street and advocate things that they believe in, protest about these issues, or other people go through the media. But you did through a book. So I was wondering, like, what made you to make that decision?
Because in school, the things that came very easy to me was writing. You could give me one line, and I can write a whole thesis about it. You know? And so that was like a healing for me. It is very natural for me to write, and I can write my feelings and everything very easily. Sometimes much better than I can actually speak it. You know,
Wow.
So I started it off mainly as a healing for me, and it was, in my opinion, going so good that I felt this needs to be published.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I decided to go that route. And because of the fact that domestic violence is something that affects people all over the world,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and so many women suffer in silence, I want to bring light to it. I want to be able to educate people everywhere I go. And then it's very, very easy for women to talk about domestic violence because, you know, they are the ones that's the main victims of it. But when you have it from a male's point of view, I think, in my opinion, that can give it a little bit more oomph, if I can use that word.
I see.
Yeah. But everywhere I go, people literally, I mean, they come out in large numbers, and I have people come up to me afterwards everywhere I go and sharing their stories, their horror stories about what they're actually going through. And you would be amazed at how many women are so scared to talk because they're scared of their abuser.
I see.
Yeah.
So there's like there's not like that open room where everybody feels comfortable to talk
Right.
about.
Yeah.
I think this is like a big issue in our society about like domestic
It's a
animal.
major issue.
Yeah.
Right? Even on a college campus, you have a lot of couples that are on college campus, okay? And a lot of these girls are abused right here on college campuses. But they're not going to say anything, you know, they hide it. But it needs to be taught. And the reason why a lot of girls maybe accept the abuse is because some people don't think abuse is abuse if it's not physical. But then there is mental, there's verbal, there's emotional. You know, the moment someone has to dictate to you what you can wear and where you can go and who your
I
friends
see.
can
Yeah.
be and all of that is abuse. But people sweep those things under the rug because it's not physical.
So the meaning and the understanding of domestic violence is underestimated in this type of situation. I definitely agree with you. I think this is a thing that we can all observe and see around our society. If you bring it to campuses, I know like you have a good connection with Wake Forest University
Yes.
here in North Carolina. And one thing I've always noticed is like when I see you around, like you have that really good connection and strong relationship with our community, with the students, with faculties. So I can see that you are really friendly and approachable, but how do you really keep that relationship, that closeness with a lot of our community members on campus?
Because I'm by nature a very friendly person, you know.
I mean, I can see that for sure.
Very approachable. I think I've been through so much in my life that I am one of the very few people that I know of that is really not judgmental at all. I don't care who you are, what you may have been through. I don't judge or knock anyone for whatever their likes or dislikes may be. I try to make everyone feel welcome, you know. So that's why people find it very easy to talk to me, you know. So, but I want people to learn and to get out of my message that violence, be it physical, verbal, mental, emotional, any type of abuse is unacceptable. I want people to understand their value, and that you cannot allow, and you know, some organizations don't like the word allowed to be used because they think that these women are not allowing this, you know. But that's the way I put it, you know.
I see,
You cannot allow yourself to be caught up in that situation where you are abused like that.
So what do you think like is the main cause? So you mentioned like the different ways that domestic violence can be applied to. What do you think is the main cause of domestic violence in the first place? And as you mentioned earlier, it is everywhere. It's not just in the U.S. It's not just in the Caribbean. It's everywhere. So what do you think are the most what do you think are like the causes of domestic violence?
You see, the thing is, a lot of people want to be in control. Okay? It's about being in control and having power over another human being. That's a main issue. Or that's one of the main reasons. Then you have a lot of men that are extremely insensitive to anybody else around them. And I blame a lot of parents for that, because you have a lot of dads and even mom, you know, when their boys are young, they cry to, oh, shut up, men don't cry, you know. You're not allowed to express your emotions, you know, because they think it's feminine.
I see.
And then,
definitely.
And so these boys have to grow up trying, you know,
masculinity.
Keeping everything in, you know, and putting on this rough exterior. So when they grow up and they get involved in relationships, how do you expect them to show any sensitive side, you know, or sensitivity to a person, because this is all they know. So they go into their relationships being the me, Tarzan, you, Jane type of syndrome, and that's where the control, because they think that that's how they were raised. A lot of men are raised like that, especially in the Caribbean.
So what would be like your final message that you would like to pass to our audiences who are watching these videos?
Yeah. Value yourself. I want people to learn and accept themselves and understand how valuable they are. When I counsel with a lot of people, I tell them, see yourself the way Christ sees you. Okay? When Christ looks at you, he sees you whole, he sees you complete, he sees you wrapped up in the righteousness of his Son. Value yourself and see yourself the way Christ sees you, and understand how precious you are, and don't allow another human being to control your life. Domestic violence is a worldwide epidemic. Hundreds and hundreds of people are killed every year at the hands of domestic violence. I hear major stories everywhere I travel about people that have been killed by this. We need to bring light to it. People need to be aware of it and understand that there are resources that they have at their fingertips to help, and you do not have to suffer in silence. And hopefully I can educate a lot of people so that a lot of people who may have potentially been killed, like my sister, will not be, but they will be rescued. Unfortunately, I was not there the second time to rescue my sister, but I can certainly try to rescue a whole lot of other women worldwide.